Welcome to episode 47 of Experience This. Here today with my esteemed colleagues, co-hosts, and Mr. Rod Cuthbert. Let's start with a quick intro. I'm Christian Watts with Magpie Travel.
Hey everyone, I'm Lori Timoney with Go City. It's an honor to have you here, Rod. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
And Bruce Rosard with Arrival, and really psyched to have the godfather of tours and activities with us. So welcome, Rod.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was confused if it was the godfather or the grandfather. I get those things mixed up, but Rod has been called the godfather, I think of. And I believe, Bruce, you can correct me, but I believe Rod did sort of the opening intro to the very first Arrival. Is that right? On a video call or on it recorded?
Yeah, he was nice enough to do a video recording for us for the 2017 edition. You weren't in Vegas, obviously, but we did have that. I wonder where that video is. That would probably be fun to pull out. But yeah.
So Rod, how did you invented the industry apparently? How did this all come about? Do you want to give us a quick rundown?
I wasn't conscious of inventing an industry. I can tell you that. In fact, it building a marketplace, which is a word we might come back to later on, but let's call it an aggregated offering of sightseeing tours, attractions, experiences, etc. Was not our idea at all. We were a company that built websites, and we built them exclusively for travel companies, principally in Australia, but actually all over the world. We had customers all over the world from our offices in Sydney. And we had hired a woman who had worked at Sabre here in Sydney, and she was aware of a project that Sabre were kicking off to develop what they called a ground content database for travel agents, so that travel agents, and at that time Sabre had 40,000 travel agency locations, so probably about 120, 150,000 actual agents around the world who were booking flights and hotels through the green screen, through the pre-internet interface. And they were absolutely conscious of the fact that the web was coming and it was going to change everything, and they wanted to gain experience in that market, get a foothold. It was going to take them a while to transition their hotel and principally, the most important thing was the flight booking interface over to the web. So they thought, let's do something completely different that hasn't been done before, where we won't have a competitor. Let's build a system that will allow agents to book sightseeing tours, hop on, hop off buses, museum guides, etc., etc. It was a great idea, and we won that contract for one reason and another. And they spent about $100,000 with us, and we built a system. And I can recall vividly my colleague and I flying to Dallas, Texas, to formally hand over the system and sign papers, whatever you do. And when we arrived, it was traumatic, to say the least. We got out of our car, we walked to the lobby of the building. There were security guards, there were people crying, holding cardboard boxes, hugging their colleagues. We had arrived in the middle of a significant layoff that Sabre was doing, and it impacted the group that we had been working with. They actually didn't all get fired. They all got moved to other parts of Sabre, oddly enough. But the division, or the little group that we've been working with, was gone. Its manager was gone. All the people were gone, and they had absolutely, it wasn't that they had no interest, they just weren't there anymore. We had to find, it took a day or two to find somebody high enough up the ladder who hadn't been shifted sideways or fired to say to us, look, we have no longer got any interest at all in that project. And you should go away and do it yourself, or do whatever you want with it. We've paid for it, it's yours. Which is, I think you'll agree, the most unusual way to fall into a business that I have ever heard of.
100K of funding, no equity given up. That's not terrible.
Terrible.
What year was that?
The only thing was we didn't believe in their vision exactly. We loved the product side of it. We absolutely believed in that. We could see there was demand, and it was global. We thought that side was a great idea, but we didn't like the idea of working with travel agents because we were inside the web industry and we felt the web is going to decimate these guys. As soon as the airlines and the hotels figure out how to sell their products online, people aren't going to go to travel agents because it's sort of fun to go and book your own flight. You've got control of it. And so we thought we'll build a consumer website instead.
What year was that, Rod?
That was 97, 98 that sort
Oh.
of transition happened. So
And then, go ahead. What next?
Well, I just wanted to say that the travel landscape at that time, the online travel landscape, was pretty sparse. Expedia was in the market. Preview Travel had already sort of launched, IPO'd, and I'm not sure when they were acquired by Travelocity, but Travelocity were there. So there was a few online travel agencies, but perhaps more importantly, airlines and hotels and others had started to get involved. They'd started to build websites, and people had their toe in the water. But the water wasn't very deep at that stage.
And at that point in time, nobody was in the travel space was even thinking about tours and activities. I mean, I remember, being a buyer at a couple of different big tour operators, and we never even, I mean, we just wrote in whatever the retail rate was for an activity and, a city tour and called it a day. We never did any research on tours and activities, spent all our time on hotels, air, train, etc. So what a time to, I mean, I guess you really were the godfather of tours and activities.
Well, there was this other really fundamental problem that tour operators faced. I'll illustrate it with an example. Let's say you're a tour operator in Rome and you do a tour of the Sistine Chapel with a guide, the Vatican Museum, etc., etc. And down here in Melbourne, Australia, you've got a family of four that they absolutely want to do that tour, and they insist on the travel agent booking it in advance. This is 1997, let's say. Well, the tour operator does some research. That's actually quite hard because, the web isn't really a thing. Maybe he's not even using the web yet, but he does some research somehow or other. He finds this tour operator in Rome. He faxes them, most likely. He might call them. He makes a booking. The family travel, and then the tour operator says, great, the family traveled, pay me. And the travel agent, he's busy with other things and he's never going to need that tour operator again. I mean, that was just such a remote thing that he should want to make that booking. It is simply not a priority for that agent to pay that tour operator. And unlike flights and hotels, which were managed by IATA-based systems and Sabre and et cetera, the payment flow was built into those things. There is no payment flow for these ad hoc bookings that occurred. So experience operators at that time, they really didn't like taking bookings from the other side of the world because chances were they weren't going to get paid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very much the traditional sort of tour operator period where there were resellers, but it was the travel agent group in the UK or in Germany, and it was pretty messy. So you launched at that time with Viator.com?
Yeah, we did.
Is that right?
We launched Viator.com, but it didn't, it wasn't as though we had thousands of visitors to the website or anything like that. It was pretty slow. What got us going was that I went to a Focusrite conference, and I ran into, where I was in the audience, and Rich Barton was talking. Rich Barton was the first CEO of Expedia, and he gave a talk about his vision for Expedia. And he talked about a consumer being able to book a flight and a hotel and a rental car. And he said, to my surprise, I can't remember what it was something like surfing lessons in Fiji or scuba diving in Palau or something like that. It was some very remote thing. But it illustrated the fact that he wanted to have what he didn't call then, but we would have called now, a connected trip. And I approached him afterwards and I said, that surfing lessons in Fiji, we could get that for you. I was stretching there, I have to tell you. I don't know how we would have got surfing lessons in Fiji, but anyway, he said, well, we'll, to cut a long story short, he said, we'll give you a try. We'll do some sort of white label with you, and we'll sell your product. And that was, I think, a really good decision on their part, because it gave them an opportunity to test out demand for tours and activities. And there was demand. Our first bookings came via Expedia, and it was really healthy. We then went off and just replicated that with Travelocity, so they both featured our products, and with literally dozens and dozens of other either white label or API partners who they were offering experiences, but it was all Viator product.
So it was B2B that got you started, more or less.
Yeah, we hadn't figured out and did not have staff on the marketing team, that is marketing our product to end users. We hadn't figured out SEO. We hadn't figured out SEM. We didn't understand demographics. We were just a little company on the other side of the world, sort of really happy that we'd been able to launch something that was global, and there appeared to be some interest in it.
No, I didn't used to like Viator back then at all, because you chose to work with my competitor, Super Sightseeing Tours in San Francisco, and you would be so loyal and you wouldn't open it up to anybody else. So I think you chose sort of one category per city. Is that right? And we tried to not bribe, but we offered healthy commissions, and you guys wouldn't budge. So you were sort of our competitor, really. And that's a model which you kept for a long time, I think, isn't it?
It is, and we would describe it like this. We would say you could do a lot of research to try and figure out which is the best company, for example, to go with for a day's touring in the Napa Valley out of San Francisco. There are a dozen companies that offer products that are all fairly much that's what they do. That's their core. And our pitch was, we've done the work for you. Our product managers have been to San Francisco. They've done the tours. They've decided on who has the premium offering. So we have what you might call a curated model, where we selected operators that we felt really good with, so that you don't have to do the work. And that worked quite well for us for many years. But you can see the tension that's inherent in that model. Not so much with, well, I guess, wine tours in Napa Valley, but, when you go to Las Vegas and you've got helicopter rides, where it's really quite capacity constrained. You can only do, you can only fit so many people in a helicopter. They can only go so many times a day. There are only, you quite quickly get to the point where you've got more customers who want to do a Grand Canyon tour in a helicopter than your curated one or two suppliers can offer. So you have this tension between a curated offering and a marketplace offering. It seems as though we got to talking about this fairly quickly.
Well, yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit, because I think it is such a key topic going on right now. I mean, the example we talk about a lot is, well, there's 1,000 walking tours of the Vatican, when you go on Viator and get your guide, and who needs all that? And then there are some others that are really offering the curated marketplace. And even Head Out was called it a SKU, and they get a SKU, and they only have 5 walking tours of the Vatican. But they work with a lot of different operators behind the scenes. So what do you all think of that? What are the pros and cons? And, what did you see, Rod? And when did that transition from Viator being a curated marketplace to a kind of wide open marketplace now?
Well, we've really managed to fast forward. And I do want to come back to the Vatican, because the Vatican actually plays a really crucial role in the evolution of the tours and activities marketplace, which even I find that surprising.
Really? There's
yeah,
religion in tours and activities, huh?
it's
I
sort
mean,
of.
the Vatican, everybody wants a tour of the Vatican. So that's why there's millions of walking tours and there's millions of opportunities to see the Vatican, because so many people want to see it that they all sell out and there's no inventory.
Right. So maybe let's talk about that, and then we'll come back to curated versus marketplace. The Vatican Museum, the Sistine Chapel, St. Peter's Basilica, that whole offering was really clear to us that was big money. And in the early days, in the early 2000s, one of our product managers, Dominique Exman, was spending a fair bit of time in Rome, getting close to the operators that we worked with there, and watching what was happening down at the Vatican, and seeing, people were flying in on their EasyJet or Ryanair flight, spending 3 days. And of that 3 days in Rome, they would spend 4 or 5 hours in a line outside the Vatican. It was complete madness, the way that things worked. So she worked with one of our operators in Rome. They approached the Vatican and they said, what if we put together small group tours? So, 8 or 12 people, we'll do them for set times. They'll congregate with our guide, and then we'll walk up to the gate at a certain time, but we'll pay you 2.5x the normal ticket price. Well, the church is commercial. They went for that straight away. They also liked the fact that they didn't have to process each person individually with a ticket. They could just have, one ticket. So it reduced paperwork, it increased their margins. They saw it as being quite efficient. And that, it did a number of things. It's quite subtle, I think, what happened. Perhaps the most important thing that it did was that it brought a new type of customer into the market. And so we got to sort of rewind now to that time and say, who did experiences then? Well, people who thought of themselves as sort of cool, or there was a lot of, what I'm getting at is a lot of people who looked down their nose at sightseeing tours. They saw a sightseeing tour as being 20 people on a bus, or a bunch of people with their Lacoste tops tucked into their shorts, looking really daggy, following a lady with an umbrella and a flag on top. And that's not an unreasonable view to have of the sightseeing market at that time. It was pretty uncool, and it wasn't unreasonable that people looked down their nose at it. And here comes a different type of tour. It's a small group. There's no lady holding an umbrella. It's priced higher, but that's okay. $70 to go on a tour of the Vatican instead of 35. Okay, whatever. There was this, we didn't know it, we weren't economists, but we were testing the price elasticity of demand, and it turned out there was an enormous amount of elasticity. So by this one sort of exercise of creating skip the line tours, small group tours that would enter as soon as you arrived, 10 o'clock, okay, you're in. Just with that one thing, we sort of changed the marketplace quite profoundly. And Dominique immediately took that to the Colosseum, to the Eiffel Tower, to other places, other sort of key attractions around Europe. And our product managers in New York and Las Vegas and San Francisco all saw that. And all of a sudden, Skip the Line tours were literally everywhere. Skip the Line and small group tours.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think, we definitely capitalized on that as well. Adding Skip the Line wherever we could. It's interesting what has happened to Skip the Line a little bit. Not everywhere, but with time ticketing now, that whole Skip the Line play is just not exactly the same as it used to be. Used to do Skip the Line, and you can still do sort of skip the security line at some place like an Empire State Building, but now you have to book a ticket and you get that time and you walk in. So, but I do agree with you. The Skip the Line thing is a huge is of huge interest to people. And yeah, still out there today, but changing for sure, I think, with the time ticketing thing.
Well, now you need to skip the line, right? Because there's so many different skip the lines that skip the lines
And then you
not a
can
good
only
thing.
buy so many skip the lines, because if you buy too many, then it's not a skip the line anymore. That's part of the problem with that. You can't sell
Yeah.
too many of those things.
As
All right,
long as
so
the
let me skip
church, as
way
long as the
ahead.
church gets its money, that's fine. Go
We
ahead,
Yeah.
Bruce.
skipped ahead. Well, Rod, you were telling the story of the founding story. Is there somewhere you want to go back to that you think was really key that we missed?
No, I think we inadvertently, we didn't intend to do it, but we inadvertently put the market onto a sort of a slippery slope where all of a sudden people who would never have looked at sightseeing tours, a sort of a formal pre-booked sightseeing tour with a guide, they just wouldn't have done that. They were too cool for school, right? They were the people who had their Lonely Planet, or maybe they booked a private guide with their concierge. That was sort of a very high-end offering. But everything in between, all of the stuff that we have today, it just didn't exist because those people weren't in the market. But by introducing skip the line and small group tours, we put consumers on a slippery slope, to where we were.
So, Rod, two of my favorite stories, if we can go back to your sort of history, two of my favorite stories are to do with Look Tours. So, Look Tours were a competitor, right, based in Las Vegas, English guy. I liked Look Tours because they sold my product in San Francisco. They sold a ton. They were really good. The thing about Look Tours is, I'm sure most people don't remember them. It was a long time ago, and Viator bought them, but they were really aggressive on commission rates, and they had such a lock on Las Vegas and sold such massive volume that it was kind of the gun to the head. And they would call me every Monday. We had a product meeting, and their product guy would call us. Their sightseeing product guy would call us to discuss the website, and it was basically to try and squeeze an extra 2% every week out of every product they could. And it was all about just squeeze. And we kind of gave in because they had such massive volume. So it was an interesting company. It was kind of the Walmart, wasn't it, Rod, of the industry. My favorite story from then, I used to speak to Steve, who was the owner, and I had a website, and we used to sell in a few other cities as well. And I was trying to get product in Las Vegas. So I was calling around all the day trips to the Grand Canyon, because obviously that's a trip you need. And it was all $160, and everyone was giving me net rates of 120, whatever. It was all, normal commission. But Look Tours had this product on their website, and it was $89 for an adult for a day trip, same exact thing. So I called Steve at Look Tours. I said, Steve, I just want to get a net rate from you for this day trip to the Grand Canyon by bus. I said, can you give me a net rate? He said, yeah, of course, I'll send you a net rate. And he sent me a thing, and it was $99. Called him back. I said, no, Steve, I want the one that's 89 on your website. Can you give me a net rate on that one? He said, yeah, I did 99. I said, no, you don't understand, Steve. It's got to be less than the retail. And he said, well, it's not. I said, well, you can't sell it to me for more than you're selling it to the public. He said, well, I can, and I am. Do you want to buy it? And I sort of thought about it, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'll buy it. So I paid more than the retail because it wasn't worth. I said I could just go to the website and buy it myself and resell it. He said, yeah, you could do that as well, or we can have a contract. But anyway, that was Look Tours, Rod. But you got some good Look Tours stories.
Well, we had just had an investment from the Carlyle Group, the venture capital firm, and they made us aware of the fact that Look Tours was for sale in 2006. We weren't aware of it. Steve had not contacted us, but somehow through their network, Carlyle are a big business. They've got tentacles out there in the world. They made this discovery. We went out and visited with Steve. We liked the business. I mean, they were as big as we were, and they were as big as we were just based on what they were doing in Las Vegas. They did have they had some city-specific sites for New York and San Francisco, but 90% of their business was Las Vegas shows, Grand Canyon, et cetera. So we wanted to buy them. We struck a deal with them. And then, we started to take control of the business. We put our people in there. Steve was sort of transitioning out. I think he had a 3-month workout, something like that. And he had just left. And I got a call. I was in Paris, and I got a call that Look Tours was off the air. Like, you went to the website, it just wasn't there. And I couldn't believe that. It was 6 a.m. in Las Vegas. I'm calling frantically. And what I discover is that somebody has gone to the offices in the middle of the night and stolen the web servers, like broken into the office. And these were the days when it was pre-cloud. There was no AWS or Google Cloud. So people typically would have a server room at their office and would have some high-speed internet connections and would have a bunch of servers in there. And they would have some guys on staff, typically guys, who ran their sort of web operations. And that was exactly what happened there. And somebody had broken into the server room, had disconnected the 2 very big, powerful servers that we had in there, and made off with them. Not only had they made off with them, but we had backups, or I should say, I should shift the blame a little bit here. Look Tours had backups of everything in the server room, and they took the backups as well. So the business that we'd paid multiple millions of dollars for, and we were very happy with ourselves, patting ourselves on the back, what a great idea this was. It literally disappeared off the face of the planet overnight. Not only was there going to be no new business, but all of the existing sort of transactions that were traveling at that time, everything was gone. So it was panic stations. I flew back. We flew a couple of our people. Jordan Digby and Mark Greenwood came up from the tech team in Sydney. We didn't know what to tell them other than see if you can get this business up and going again quickly. And we managed to do that. In 4 or 5 days, we, using a combination of sort of emails that the system had generated, which got copied to our staff, out to the clients, we managed to find all the customer transactions that were live. We used the thing called the Internet Wayback Machine, which keeps a sort of a record of web pages on websites over time. It had terrific coverage of our site. And using a whole different combination of tools, they managed to get the site going again. We got it going again on our platform rather than the Look Tours platform. But we were off the air for maybe 4 or 5 days, and we had sort of recovered completely in about 2 months. We were back to sort of pre-incident levels. We called it the incident.
The incident.
Did you ever hear from the thieves again? That's the question. What were they after?
Well, oddly enough, we couldn't get the Las Vegas police interested. There is crime in Las Vegas, you might know, and much of the crime there involves people, and they're less interested in crime involving computer servers. It just wasn't on their radar. But it turns out that the US Secret Service are interested in crimes that involve the theft of credit cards, particularly when it's across state lines. So we had tens and tens of thousands of credit card records for customers all over the US, and they had been stolen, and there was some concern that there might be fraud associated with that. And the Secret Service turned up one day. This sort of, Escalade pulls into the parking lot unannounced. 4 big guys in dark suits and dark glasses arrive. Frankly, they didn't do much either. It was a crime that never got solved. Nobody has any idea who did it or why. It's just one of life's little mysteries.
I feel like I did my part that week to help Rod. I was when I went, because we like I say, we were competing with you in some markets, and we noticed your website was down, and all your affiliates were sending links to websites that were down. So we called all your affiliates and said, listen, if you want to redirect your affiliates to my website, you can still make some money while these guys sort out the servers. So I'm not sure if we stole any affiliates, but I was just trying to help out the industry in the
Oh, yeah.
meantime.
It sounds
Can,
like that.
Good
can,
gift, Christian.
can we jump forward, Rod, to talk about the exit then? So the eventual exit was to TripAdvisor, I think most people know. So how
Mhm.
did that come about, and how was that transition?
We, I think it's probably important to know that, you know, the two major competitors, two really great companies that emerged as Viator's principal competitors, Get Your Guide and Klook. Get Your Guide, I think, was 2009, maybe 2008. So they were very young around that time. And Klook was not until about 2012. So, you know, it wasn't the case that we had a lot of competition at the time or that there was a lot of focus on this marketplace. Everybody who was selling tours and activities at that time in any sort of volume was most likely getting their product from Viator, either via an API or a white label or whatever. Of course, you had, you know, the direct sites like Smart Destinations and City Pass and some of the walking tour companies, et cetera, et cetera. Those companies had begun to bubble up, and that, you know, there was really quite a big marketplace of tour operators by them, but none of them were doing the sort of volumes that Viator were doing. And that hampered our progress. Competition is such a really wonderful thing because, you know, if you've got a strong competitor out there and they're doing marketing and they're bringing customers into the market, a percentage of those customers say, oh, before I make a booking, I must figure out what the alternatives to this guy are. You know, who else does what these guys do? So they do some research and they discover you. That wasn't happening for us at all. There was nobody else bringing customers into the marketplace with a sort of a, you know, an offering of all the things to do in Barcelona or New York or whatever. So at that time, if you searched on things to do in Barcelona, you'd likely find us. You might find Expedia, Travelocity, but it was clear that we were the specialists in the space because on all of the other sites, it was like a tab on a site that did a whole lot of other things. And naturally, a lot of people were attracted to this site Viator that was quite specialized in the tour space.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I was working with Viator back then, and for sure, you know, no doubt, really the leader in that space for an OTA specifically. There were other categories that maybe were drawing in some pretty big business for us at the time, but from the OTA space, Viator was really the king at that point. And it's been interesting to see the way that has changed over the last you know, even 6-7 years. I just feel like there's been, you know, with the addition of some of the OTAs like Musement and, you know, obviously the rise of Get Your Guide, but then you have the niche operators like Civitatis and CITIS from the French market, and they're all doing very well and offering different kinds of solutions. And so I feel like that has definitely had an impact on Viator for sure.
They're
Right,
doing very well, but I don't have the data, but Viator's still at the very top for revenue sold in the industry. And then you probably have Get Your Guide and Klook next. Musement's a little different since it's part of TUI, so that's a whole different picture of what that all includes, right? And then Civitati, CITIS, some of the other brands you mentioned, but Viator is still very much at the top.
It's big, but it's interesting because of course now with it being an open marketplace, I mean, it just has this crazy amount of inventory.
Yeah, right.
That you know, we're talking about curation a little while ago, and obviously that's not the case anymore with Viator. So you have just massive quantities of, you know, like as you said, you know, a million different types of walking tours or of actually of the same type of walking tours. But no, I actually do see a shift. I have to say that I know what the numbers say, but I think that it's been interesting to watch that shift in the business. It's definitely moved to different OTAs in the space.
Well, and you can also look at, number of affiliates. How many affiliates does Viator have? Because like you said, Rod, back in the day when you're talking about, almost all the inventory came back to Viator. I don't think we're that far away from that either, where Viator has so many more affiliates than the competitors of Viator at this point. I don't know if any of you have an idea what that looks like.
Well, what would you have done differently, Rod, with all of that? Viator's had a great few years, but by the numbers, TripAdvisor hasn't. TripAdvisor stock, I think, peaked the year they bought Viator. That's a long time. That's 10 years now. The TripAdvisor company has not grown by $1. I don't, maybe I'm off a little bit, but I think it's worth 2 billion today, and I think it was worth a lot more than that at one point. What would you have done differently? Not to say that TripAdvisor equals Viator, but obviously it's a key part of it. What would you have done differently if you'd have kept hold of Viator?
Look, this sort of brings us back to the curated versus marketplace thing. Eventually, you get to a point where you just need more supply. Let's go to Las Vegas, and we've taken 200 bookings for helicopter flights down to the west rim of the Grand Canyon, and believe me, you can sell that many helicopter flights in a day in Las Vegas. You've reached your capacity with your 2 preferred suppliers. You've just reached the capacity. You can't sell anymore. So what do? You just need more supply. Now there is, and I'll focus out now because I don't want to focus on, when I talk about the next issue, I don't want to focus on any one particular space, but there is a nexus between the number of suppliers you have, whether it's curated or not, and the quality of the offering. The reason that you chose those preferred suppliers is because your product manager looked at their offering and said, wow, these coaches are really new. They're fantastic. And their guides are great. And their customer service appears to be really good. And when something goes wrong, they seem to want to fix it. That's why you chose those operators. Best walking tours for sure. Best hop on, hop off, whatever it is. And that implies that the others in the marketplace maybe are not the best. Maybe their coaches are older, maybe their guides are less well trained, etc., etc. So, when you open the marketplace, when you shift from curated to marketplace, you've got this sort of inevitable tension. Now, the fact is, if you want to grow, and that's in the sort of commercial model that we have, you want to grow your business, that tension exists. You have to open it up. I think I would have found it quite difficult to do that, because I would have said, we need to maintain quality levels, but that would have meant that we would have had to put the sort of sold out sign up a lot more often in places where there were significant opportunities for growth. And so it's good that I wasn't there when we hit that point.
I would push back on that a little bit. As I see the point, but I would say a marketplace fundamentally is the algorithm is better than a human at floating the best products to the top. And you say you chose the best products based on this and buses and that. Maybe some markets you chose the bus company because they bought you the best steak, not you personally, but the market managers, and they get accustomed to their ways, and new company pops up, which is actually better, and you don't switch because you're loyal. So I would say a marketplace actually is quite good at finding the best products.
That's what it's supposed to do, Christian. I mean, that's what the algorithm is supposed to do. But I think there are other considerations that drive that. And not everything is equal. So, the commission, right? The commission that is fed into the algorithm is something that is important. Obviously, reviews are huge. And that's, like, to your point, that as long as the reviews are accurate, they're real, that's another thing you have to consider with that piece of it. The content, I think there are some things that are that are not necessarily as equal as they probably need to be to say that across the, the algorithm is supposed to solve for this. I know it's supposed to solve for it. I'm not sure it always does. I kind of like an integrated approach myself. I sort of like that some of these businesses, like I think Civitatis may use a little bit of that, where they do sort of a curated and a combination curated and algorithm. So they have the ability to dive in and adjust things if they need to or want to. Anyway, I see that working pretty well, but yeah, I understand the idea behind it.
Yeah, I think you can, to your point, Laurie, have a combination of curated where you've got your preferred offerings, your sort of 5-star offerings that are shown first, and it's clear that that's what you're recommending. But there is overflow. There is the capacity to sell more product into the consumer market if you need to.
So what about mistakes, Rod? Looking at your whole career in the industry, what would you have done different? What have been your biggest mistakes? Selling too early, selling too late, raising VC money, moving too fast, too slow? What are your biggest mistakes? If you could do it over again, starting 30 years ago, what would you have done differently?
Sometimes I joke and say if you went right back to the start, we would have done hotels instead of because there's a lot of money in hotels, and clearly, everybody who started a hotels business at that time and sold for an awful lot of money. But we've had a great time. We really, really enjoyed the friends we made. We enjoyed the fact that inadvertently we had a significant impact on the way the industry evolved. We think we sort of pushed it along, but the fact that we were there from 97 onwards, we got it started. We got the sort of online experiences space started, a little faster than it might have got started. So perhaps even if we went back in time, we wouldn't do hotels anyway, because it was just so much fun doing experiences. There are so many people at Viator, and you guys know many of them, who have become fixtures in the industry, and it's been an important part of their lives, and you wouldn't want to redo that. I guess the difference, things we would do differently, and I did speak to Alan from Carlisle and John Murray from TVP, our Australian investors, just over the last week or so. And we all agreed that if we could rewind to 2010, instead of selling to Tripadvisor, we would have found another $20 million to tip into the bucket and built a $1 billion company, which is what happened. And then IPO'd that a few years later. But at the time, Carlisle had been invested for 9 years, which is longer than a typical VC investment. And their return, which was about a 9x return, was a good return on their funds invested. TVP had an even better return, was great for me. In retrospect, when you think that Klook and Get Your Guide, they raised $300 million, Series C or D or whatever. So our $200 million for the whole company looked small, but at the time, it was the right amount. It was the amount that a buyer was prepared to pay, and it was a good number for all of the investors in Viator. So.
And do you have full decision making at that point in time? Do you have enough control, or is it the case that if you chose to stay on, it's just really painful with your current investors, or how does that work for an exit?
Well, I wasn't involved in the day-to-day of the business at all by that time. Barry Seidenberg was the CEO and doing a much better job of running a growth business than I would have done. By about 2010, when I left sort of day-to-day operations, it had really become a business that you managed through the spreadsheet. It wasn't a business that was about strategy as much as it was about tactics. Um, so, you know, my skill set had become less and less relevant, and Barry's skill set had become absolutely crucial. So, you know, we employed, as you do when you sell a business, we employed a investment bank. They went out to the marketplace. We had a great relationship, a commercial relationship with Tripadvisor, where they were selling a lot of our product via the Tripadvisor site, and they saw the potential to do even more with that. So it made sense on all fronts, and I think that was reflected in the fact that it was an all cash deal rather than a cash and stock deal, which, you know, which would have reflected something different.
And what about now? So with everything that you've learned and trends over the last, I keep saying 30 years, which I think it is almost, especially the trends part, because there's been a lot of trends and we don't need to go through them all. But what do you see going forwards then for the current players in the market? I think there's a lot of companies, then you've mentioned some of them. I think Get You Guides up to $1 billion now they've raised cumulatively. I think Klook's not far behind. There seems to be a bit of a problem there with some valuations, but what do you see going forward? Is this industry just going to keep at these current growth rates? Is it a bit of a squeeze at the top, and there's going to be some bloodshed, or how do you see things?
I suspect that if Bruce dragged out his research from a rival, he would tell you that the penetration of online into, you know, the sales of a typical experience operator is still low. You know, there's just so much headspace for us to grow into. If us is the online experiences market, we've got so much potential to get a larger share that I think it's all good news going forward. You know, there's plenty of opportunity for everybody to continue to grow and innovate. So, you know, I don't see that we are by even close to being a mature market yet. I think there's lots of upside. I want to come back to something that is just I keep reminding myself to raise, and that is, and I'm glad Laurie's here because you know, Smart Destinations, GoCity were a really good partner of ours, and we did this really fundamental thing early on in the piece, which again, we didn't realize it was important at all. It was just a decision we made one day in a meeting. And that was that we would pay all of our suppliers in the month following when we got the booking. And we wouldn't ask them to send a voucher back. And Expedia and others were asking the customer to bring the voucher to the you know, coach tour or whatever, walking tour, and the driver had to collect them and take them back to the office, and they then had to submit them to us in order to get paid, which is, well, not to us, but to Expedia. And it just looked to us like an enormous amount of paperwork, and we'd need to have storage all over the place for all these vouchers, and it was just nuts. We said, look, if we took a booking and we've got the money, we're going to pay you your share of it and we'll keep our share. And we're just not going to worry about the paperwork. We will eat the shrinkage. If the customer doesn't turn up, we're going to pay you anyway. And suppliers love two aspects of that. They love the fact that there wasn't any shrinkage, and they love the fact that we just paid them every month. They could rely on our payments, and they'd never had that from the channel before. And that meant that when we went and had meetings with Cecilia at Smart Destinations or Nacho at Julia Tours in Barcelona, or any of these people all around the world, that we were treated with a lot of respect, because we were doing this really simple thing, which was we were paying our bills. And this was not some sort of super smart thing. It was just us saying, oh my God, you know, keeping the vouchers, it's going to be too hard. Let's just pay people.
It is super smart, Rod. Getting rid of vouchers. When, like, what year are you talking about? When you got rid of vouchers? That's probably Christian didn't know that since he didn't work with you.
I remember stacks and stacks and stacks of vouchers. You could barely see the accounting department because there were so many vouchers all over the place. But it wasn't that long really after, Rod, that Expedia picked up on that and they
Hmm.
started paying based on sales. So they sort of joined the
So when
crowd.
the customer canceled in between, Viator would do the refund, even though you've already paid the operator? Or are we getting
If
a little
we,
too far in the weeds on that?
It's based on travel dates. So if the customer's cancelled, they're not
yeah,
traveling.
if they cancelled, let's say a week in advance, then they get their money back. But if they cancel, I don't know, within 2 days, which that's was where most of the cancellations occurred,
Yeah,
because they just didn't feel like it, or they had a big night out the night before and they don't feel like doing a walking tour today, and they just, call and cancel, or they just don't show up. We just paid the supplier anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, that was
Suppliers would love that today.
time.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
nowadays it's pretty much mostly all digital. I mean, well, it is all digital, really. Things have changed obviously quite a bit in that.
It's all digital, but it doesn't mean they all pay
That's
reliably.
true.
But a lot more do, but some still definitely don't. So let's go back in time again, Rod. Just so if you're 30 years old today, you're not allowed to do hotels. You have to do the experiences industry. Someone hands you $1 million to do a startup. You can't do Magpie. What would you do?
Uh, I don't know. I liked what I did, Christian. I liked the Viator. It was a
No,
fun journey.
you're starting today.
Oh, I'm starting today.
Hmm.
No, it's a young man's game.
You're 30. You're 30 years old. You have to use your imagination to
You
get to
didn't
this
hear all the
point.
prompts, Christian's used to getting a lot of prompts and getting
Yeah.
responses.
ChatGPT gives me the whole answer in like 14 seconds. You're 30 years old today. You have got $1 million. You have to build a company in the experiences sector as of today's industry. What would you start?
You have to remember, Christian, you're talking to somebody who didn't even have the original idea for the business that he started, that that had some consequence in the marketplace. I don't claim to be somebody who has unique and interesting ideas. What the failure rate for startups is in the online travel space. Bruce, you and I have been going to those startup pitches for a long time and seen the carnage at the side of the road, as people come in with their travel planning startups or whatever it is. So no, I'm not going to do an AI-based travel planning startup.
Thank you. Thank you.
So different version of this question, which you're trying to avoid, is let's do fundraising versus bootstrap. Would you go through the fundraising route again?
Yes. Provided you've got, and I guess there are venture capital funds that don't add value, but let's assume that you've got a good VC investor. They add a rigor and a discipline, and a third party view that has real value. And I've been involved in companies that haven't had professional investors on their board, and it's just there's a real advantage to having somebody sitting on the board who's on the board of 6 other companies and can do pattern matching and say, look, we really need to have more investment in this, or I don't understand why you're doing that. And they're making those statements because of their experience across other sectors of boards they're on, and because of what their partners are telling them and what they're seeing in the market. That's just so valuable. If you've got your sort of friends and family investors or whatever, high net worth individuals, it's just not the same. They don't offer the same professional savvy insights that a VC investor offers.
That's interesting. So it's sort of forced discipline, which makes a lot of sense. Didn't expect you to respond like that.
Yep.
The fact that I've surprised you makes me happy, Christian.
So I was about to pitch you on my AI startup, which I've been putting together over the weekend. So you're not going to invest in that
AI is really
AI
interesting,
trip
isn't it?
planner?
Yeah, not in an AI trip planner. I suspect that the larger companies, the Viators, the Get Your Guides, Klukes, etc., are already saving considerable amounts of money in their back office operations, in customer service, in content management, in software development, QA, etc., etc. They're just using AI all over the place, is my suspicion. And I'm also quite certain that whilst Bruce would love them to come and talk about that at arrival, that they'll actually be quite circumspect about that, that they won't tell you exactly where they're getting the most value out of AI tools, because, why would they? If they're, for instance, if one of them has transitioned to a model where they do content management, largely using AI tools, and they don't have 60 people doing content management anymore, why would they tell the world about that? They would just do it, and not brag about it, because why give your competitor a leg up? So I think we're going to see or not see that the big companies really take advantage of AI, but behind the scenes. I'm not so convinced that it's going to be easy for tour operators, a guy running a kayak operation in the wilds of Scotland or wherever, to take advantage of artificial intelligence tools. I think that's a bit more of a stretch.
Yeah, I saw an example today. Someone on Facebook was complaining about Viator, as they do, and they were complaining. They have a walking tour. I forget where it was. Let's say in Rome, and they called it walking tour of Rome in English, because they wanted to make sure the customers know the tour is in English. And then Viator's taken that and they translated it. So now they've got walking tour of Rome in Spanish, walking tour of Rome in German, written in German and Spanish. So it kind of did its job in translating the tour name, but not what they intended.
Intent. Yeah.
So maybe Viator using a bit of AI in the background there.
Well, I haven't messed around with their trip planning tool yet. I did initially when it first came out, but I haven't touched it since. It was pretty much at the beginning stages, but I did get an email today about that, so I'll dive in and check it out. But so far, I haven't really seen one from any of those big players that has been that remarkable. So we'll see.
Yeah, we're not going to turn this into a trip planning session, even though I easily could. But for me, the problem is that the best trip planner is ChatGPT or Gemini. It's really hard to build a tool that's better. So as much as they're in the industry and they should be able to build a better tool, it's quite hard not just to use the raw AI. But I'm sure we'll see lots more movement in that space.
Yeah, we could all go to the Focusrite conference and probably see 3 or 4 if we want.
Probably.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it's going to be fun if there are 3 or 4 trip planners at Focusrite this year. I'm going to enjoy that.
Are you going to throw cabbages from the back row or something?
No, but I'll talk to the presenters afterwards and ask them what other ideas they have.
Are you going to
for
be
a
one of the
startup.
critics?
No, I think I got fired from that for being a little too open in my assessments. My fellow judges would always find a nice way of saying, "I love it. I think this is going to go really well," and I would say, "I really think you should think of another business to get into."
I've been fired for being honest too, Rod. It's a badge of honor. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Mr. Wonderful. Those who watch Shark Tank, the mean guy. You always need the mean guy on the panel.
Well,
He'll
Rod
speak
was
the
always
truth.
he was always honest on stage.
Yeah, I didn't see it as being mean. I saw it as being, I want to save you, your friends and family from
Yeah.
investing a whole lot of money in something that 20 people have tried before.
Right.
And you didn't do your research. Okay, I understand that. There's this sort of psychology that sort of prevents you from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But we here in the industry know that 20 people have tried this before, and for some reason, we're not sure why, it doesn't work. Now, Just think about that for a minute before you ask your father-in-law for $100,000. Just think about that fact.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. And everyone asks their friends and family, and everyone's trying to be nice and doesn't want to make you feel bad and wants to encourage you. And then you meet someone at a conference, and they also don't want to embarrass you if it's a one-on-one. And I think that's the problem. You hear generally encouraging words when actually someone needs to tell you to stop and look at the
Yeah.
truth and do something different.
You may or may not know that in 1999, I think it was, at a Focusrite conference in, I believe, Phoenix, Steve Kaufer, the founder of Tripadvisor, so it's 1999, and he told me that they've just pivoted the company and the new focus was on user-generated hotel reviews. And my response was, what are you smoking? That is the dumbest idea I have ever heard. Nobody is going to be interested in Joe Blow's review of the Hilton San Francisco, which I guess I was just a little bit off the mark there, just like just a little bit.
You can always be right.
Right.
Yeah.
If I'd have known that, I wouldn't have asked you which business you'd start today, but thanks for that story.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you mentioned Connected Trip way back then as well, because it's something they still talk about today and haven't, I don't think, got any closer than they were back then. But that is the future,
Yeah.
maybe.
That's another long
I
session.
Yeah.
didn't hear Rod mention the Connected Trip.
Oh,
Yeah,
you said
yeah.
back in the initial days of Expedia, Rich
Rich,
Barton.
Because now it's bookings thing.
Well, both
yeah.
of them.
I think what none of them sort of are prepared to, I mean, engineers come up with the idea of the Connected Trip, right? And the rest of the company buys it. It makes sense that we could offer all of these things in a single P&R, and it's all perfect. It's all great. It all makes sense. But the fact is, and this is why travel planning startups don't work, a significant portion of the marketplace really enjoys sort of, scrolling around the web and, looking on Get Your Guide and then looking on Viator and looking here and looking there. And they're sort of, they've got a boring job at the DMV, or it's a rainy afternoon and they're sitting at home with their laptop. It's sort of fun. It's fun scrolling around the internet thinking about your next vacation. That is actually a really crucial part of your vacation. Having it solved for you, you have an idea, let's go to Hawaii, and all of a sudden your itinerary is there. That's no fun.
Well,
That's
and
what
also, what percentage of the people get to Hawaii and they don't know what they're doing today or tomorrow? It depends on the weather. It depends how their kids are feeling. Like, that's when you book. So what's connected? Because now I'm going to start with Google or whatever, and I'll find what I want to do today. That's the part I've always had the problem with on the Connected Trip. Is the great majority of experiences are still booked in destination with the short lead time.
You
That doesn't
guys
mean
you should start promoting the disconnected trip.
Yeah, I wrote an article called "The Disconnected Trip," but that just because you book a destination doesn't mean it's not connected. But that
No,
is a whole different subject.
If let's use booking as the example, if they're really good at staying in front of me while I'm on my trip with notifications or an app or whatever, sure, okay,
Yeah.
now I can stay with booking if they have the right product. Get Your Guide's putting all their effort into their app, so they're connecting that piece to when I'm in destination. But who's doing that? Who is really staying with the traveler from the time of their original air hotel booking all the way through doing their experiences?
Yeah,
Well,
they fail. Google is.
That's going to be somebody, well, yeah. And also, I mean, if you are sort of a loyal Expedia member and you book everything on Expedia, then they do have that information. And if you're using their app, then you can potentially, they're going to try to reach you while you're in destination. But that's the problem with somebody like a Get Your Guide. They don't have all the flight details. They don't have the hotel. They don't have all that piece. So
One Expedia, I've heard for over 10 years that Expedia is going to be able to, when I land in London, say, "Oh, hi, Bruce, welcome to London. Here's 10 things that we think you should do."
Yeah, they've come and gone and come and gone, and but none of this matters because I don't know if I've mentioned AI agents before, but AI agents will be that connected trip. But I want to wrap this up with we've skipped this a couple of times. Rod, you're a traveler, you've been to a couple of places, so we need to know. We're going to do top three. So we need to know the top three best countries you've been to in order, and we need to know the top three countries that you haven't been to that you'd like to go to.
You know, I've gotten into that stage of life where I've got this sort of competing sort of, do I want to explore new places that, you know, there's some potential I won't like them. I might get there to, for instance, I've never been to South America at all. And probably I would love it, but maybe I won't, you know. I remember spending time in Miami and feeling kind of invisible because I didn't speak Spanish. So I could definitely feel like that in South America. So do I want to go there, or do I just want to go back to Italy? I really love Italy. And I love Greece and Croatia, etc. So maybe I just want to keep going back to the places that I really like. And I do think a lot of people fall into that sort of category. So I'm going to disappoint you, Christian. You may ask the questions, but I don't necessarily have to sort of, I could be like a politician and not answer your questions.
So you're not going to answer either of the questions.
Well, yeah, okay. I would say Tasmania, just the most, it's not a country, but
So you've failed on the first answer of the first question. Okay.
yeah, Tasmania, Italy, the UK, wonderful places to visit. If I
Those
could
sound
only
so
visit,
positive.
if I could only visit three more places, that would be them.
Okay. Very
And
good.
I don't have a list of, I just don't have a list of places that I haven't been to that I really want to go to. I just
I
don't.
believe we're going to finish with it. I'm finished with this. I believe you're going to Sicily in next spring to
I am.
do a course. Can you just tell us quickly about the course, the class?
Well, it's actually my wife is a ceramicist or a potter. You know, she makes things with clay. She's been doing that for the last couple of years. And a friend of ours, Matthew Newton, an Australian guy, he and his wife have got they've done a deal with the city of Salemi in Sicily, where they have an old monastery, a disused monastery, and they run ceramics classes. It's a great example of how cities and towns across European countries are sort of finding ways to revitalize their town centers by bringing people in to do various things. And they've done this collaborative deal with the ceramic studio. So she's going to do that for a week. I'm going to spend my time driving around Sicily in a probably too small, underpowered Italian car, which the air conditioning will give out each day. But I'll be exploring. Looking forward to it.
Very good. We need to find an affiliate link for the ceramic class so we can post it on here and make some commission from Matt's tours. But
Oh, I'm sure we can call Matt. I'm sure he has one.
yeah.
Yeah. Listen, I've got a question for this is a podcast, so people can't see, but I got a
Oh, it's a
question for Bruce.
podcast also, so they can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got a question for you, Bruce. Why don't you like books?
You know, I would if I didn't have a different background, I could take this background off. I love books.
Oh, okay. It's just like the rest of us got these fantastic real backgrounds, and you're the outlier there.
And how many of those books have you read behind each of you? Yeah.
Everyone.
I've read every one. In fact, I'm rereading all of them now.
That's what I do all the time. All the time, Rod. Just keep reading them over and over again.
Because you
Yeah.
forget them every 6 months.
I don't forget them, but I just some of them I really like, and you know, but then some of them I'm going, oh yeah, I forgot. I didn't really like this one.
Yeah. The worst thing is when you come back from the bookstore with a book and then you realize you already have it.
Yeah.
That's pretty
bad.
annoying.
Yeah.
Annoying.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Rod. We appreciate your time. It's been great chatting, hearing all the stories of the industry, and we'll definitely have to have you back on here in the future.
Thank you so much, guys, and I really appreciate. I watch and listen to you, and I think it's just a great thing that we have in our industry. This travel is unique in the way it allows you to form friends that you can maintain for a lifetime. And that's, I've got friends all over the world because of our industry, and that's why I'm going to stay in it for a while yet. So
In
keep
case
doing
you're
what you're
not
doing.
aware, what you are the godfather of and what you started is the best part of travel. So we put that on you and on your shoulders. So thank you for that.
Well,
Sure.
thank you for that, Bruce. And Arrival, wow, what a great piece of, what a great hub of the industry now. Sort of the glue that's keeping it together.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on that.
All right. And we're excited to have Viator's Ignite event right the day before Arrival starts. So
Yeah,
it's all
finally,
coming
well
back
done.
together. Yeah.
All right,
All
All
right.
right, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Till next time.
thanks, guys.
Thanks, Rod. It was great.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.